What's happening, everybody? Ben Osborne here with Charleston Frames. Today I want to share with you 5 tips to help you save some money whenever you're getting something custom framed. Here we go.
Number 5, size matters.
In picture framing world, most of our sizes are below 32 by 40. So we buy materials in this size and we keep that in stock. Anything bigger than that, we have to purchase one by one. We have to store it, and then sometimes we have to buy a case of it at a time, so it can get really expensive. We have up to 40 by 60 and sometimes 4 by 8, but you don't want to go that big, at least if you want to save some money. You want to stay under 32 by 40. That is as your total frame size. If you can do that, you're going to stay in a much better price zone than if you go even 1 inch bigger than 40.
Number 4, flexibility is key.
When it comes to mats, there are a lot of different colors. There's a lot of different textures and different core colors, thicknesses. And so as a framer, if I have to order something and I'm just getting one of them, and I oftentimes have to get it shipped or delivered just by itself, I have to charge for that. So it's going to be more expensive versus the customer that comes in that is more flexible. If they say, I want white to match the paper, or I want blue to match, a light blue to match the blue in the bird, something like that gives me flexibility to see what I have in stock and what I can get easily, and that is going to save you money as well. Especially when it comes to molding. Sometimes molding is on back order for months, and rather than to have to turn around and come back to you with some bad news, which I really don't want to do, I would much rather have some flexibility to potentially look to see what else is out there and try to find a replacement for you. Oftentimes companies share the same materials, and so if you are looking for something that's narrow and silver and has some green in it, or just describe it however, whatever the parts that are important to you, and if you're flexible on the rest, that's really going to help us, I think, save some money as well as speed up the framing process.
Number 3, glass hack. Glass is complicated, but it doesn't have to be. If you ask the right questions, kind of consider the environment, we can choose the right glass and even save you some money in the process. If you are looking for something that is just very temporary, let me know and we will consider one of the non-conservation types of glass. If you are looking for something that is absolutely the best of the best and it really does need really good quality, then we'll look at museum. But we don't have to go there necessarily. Quite often, I use I call the middle of the road, or CRC, Conservation Reflection Control. Here's a picture I took of Angel Oak. This has Conservation Reflection Control glass. And this is a great compromise for somebody like myself who did not want to spend the money of museum glass, but who does want some reflection control. Now this is very different from anti-reflection or reflection-free. This is just called reflection control. So it still does have reflection. It just has kind of a matte-like finish that helps to soften some of those reflections. Not as good as museum glass. Museum glass is the one in the upper right. You don't see that at all. But if you want to save some money, you're going to save, at least half, if not more, by considering something like this. This is orange CRC. There's also another one that's kind of a middle of the road. I call it Museum Junior, and that would be something that has the same reflection control properties. It's actually anti-reflection. It's just like this up here, but it has a little bit less UV protection. So instead of the 99%, it's just a little bit less. And so if you're like, hey, I would rather save some money, and it's going to be in a dark place, it's going to be in a stairway, you don't necessarily, maybe you're not concerned of the UV protection, you can save some money by getting that. And so that's called reflection-free glass. That's red. So if you ask me for orange or red, we're saving money. Number 2, less layers, less money.
What do I mean by that? Well, inside the frame, we have layers. I think of them kind of as layers inside a sandwich. You have the patty, you have the cheese, you have the lettuce and tomato and pickle and whatever else that you want on top of that. And each of those has an expense. Same way with framing. You can have glass, art, a mat. You could sometimes have another mat, piece of foam core, acrylic spacers, sometimes Coroplast, if it's really big and you need extra support, it goes on and on. Sometimes you double up the foam core. It could be a lot of layers. That's a big burger. So that's a big expense. So I would suggest thinking about how you can reduce the number of layers. If you could have just say one mat,
like this, one mat. Now, a lot of work was done to that mat, but it was one mat. They saved a bunch of money by having one mat. In this case, I used a V-groove. I hand painted the V-groove red. I hand painted the inside bevel yellow. Yes, they spent money on that part, but they saved money on the mat, and I thought that was a really good trade-off. This person, who is me, kind of wasted a little bit of money here by getting a double mat, which is a little bit unnecessary. Instead, by adding a V-groove in that one area just to cast that extra shadow, could have cut the mat cost in half. Yeah, it would add a little bit of labor, but it would have given the same effect, and it would have been a nice trade-off. Here's an example of one with a lot of layers. So this is a picture that was dry mounted to foam core. That's conservation grade foam core, so that was pretty pricey. Plus you have behind that conservation grade mat, and behind that for stability is an extra thick sheet of foam core. This is a pretty large size piece, and so you can guess that all of those layers kind of added up together really added some money. Plus, to keep the glass off of the art, I had to use acrylic spacers around the perimeter of this. Wholesale cost is $1 a foot. Looking at some, any reasonable markup, it's going to add up. So the more layers, the more money. The less layers, less money. And we've made it to number 1. This is the best way that you can save money when getting something custom framed. That is to reduce the risk.
All right, what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes people bring me artwork that's very wrinkled and it's curled up and they say, here you go, just fix it. Well, that fix it comes with a price tag. That means that that's risk that I now have to assume, that I have to try steaming or ironing or researching, and I definitely do research. There's a ton of YouTube videos on some things that you can do. I don't like any of it just because it's risky, and I don't want the risk, and no other framer does too. So if you can absorb some of the risk to try out some of the flattening techniques before you give it to the framer, for example, that would be nice. I've been asked to put varnish on people's artwork. I've been asked to try to get marks off the artwork by erasing it, to see what I can do to try to fix something. That comes with a risk. I'm now experimenting, I'm now researching, and I charge for that. So rather than having a framer put something in a dry mount press with temperatures of almost 200 degrees, and I don't mean to scare you, I love my dry mount press, but you're a little bit risky, my friend. Now I use CoolTac board, which is a low temperature board, but it's still hot. And so I use this to flatten artwork out. It's risky. I don't do it on things that can't be replaced. And so with some things in the framing world, it's a little bit risky. So if you can just kind of consider that ahead of time, and before you bring your work to the framer, just try to not put any kind of risk with that, or minimize that. That would be a great way to reduce your cost. And there you have it, 5 tips to help you save some money next time you're getting something custom framed. Make sure you reach out to me if there's anything that I can frame for you. Otherwise, definitely keep these in mind. This is a conversation between you and your framer. The more you can tell them about the things that are important to you, they will be able to focus on those things. And if they're able to be flexible with some other areas, well, then you're going to see that in savings. I wish you well. Take care.